Hello, I'm Peter Blackwood, and I'm painting an icon of St Cecilia. And I chose this model, a painting of an icon of St Cecilia by Joseph Brown. And I'd already done a sketch to see how it would fit on the panel, and here I am marking up with light pencil where the basic reference points are, where the top of the head is, bottom of the head, the shoulders, and then across the chest. This is being filmed at 4 times normal speed. I'm using a hog hair brush, quite a large hog hair brush, and yellow ochre and water, and sketching in the basic shape and face features. What I like about the model is the general composition and most of the colour scheme. I've decided to change the little organ. I'd thought at first to try and include bellows at the bottom. I did abandon this later on, but that rather skewy line down the bottom is an attempt to think about what would it look like with bellows, because that's how organs are played, with bellows. I've now added egg tempera to the yellow ochre. Egg tempera is egg yolk, 1 part egg yolk, and I use then 1 part white wine. The alcohol in the wine helps mixing with most pigments, and also it helps keep the egg tempera for months at a time in the fridge. And it smells rather nice. So with the egg rather than the water, it makes the lines and the shadings a little clearer. I'm using a number 3 Kalinsky round brush. Round brushes are suitable for watercolour, but also very suitable for egg tempera. You can see the slightly darker lines going in, darker than the water-based ones, but it is the same pigment, yellow ochre. Placing the right hand. I had thought of turning this around the other way, particularly so that the longer pipes appear on the other side of the organ. This organ is actually the wrong way round. Keyboard instruments, the bass notes are at the left end of the keyboard, and therefore these pipes should be at the left end of the keyboard. But artistically it wouldn't work. It would hide her face. Anyway, I decided in the end to leave it the way it was, so that the right hand is the hand that is gesturing towards the instrument. This is fairly normal in icons, that an object is held in the left hand and there is a gesture towards it by the right hand. Now I've thought to make the hands different from the model, have the hand coming from underneath to support the organ. In the end, I didn't stay with that idea because it just didn't work. But we'll see that soon. What I've done now is to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to the yellow, and this makes it an interesting shade of green. Yellow and blue make the secondary colour green. And now starting to shape the face using shading. Now I've changed my mind about the hand, so I just scrubbed out that left hand, trying to support the organ from below, and putting it back at the side of the organ as it is in the model by Joseph Brown. Now I've added some ultramarine blue to the yellow ochre, which makes it an interesting green hue, and just working up the shading now, modelling the face. Just while we're doing this, can I say that the music that we're hearing underneath this commentary is music of Charles Gounod. It's the Messe Solennelle, which is a mass dedicated to St Cecilia. At the moment, as I am painting this icon, I am in 2 choirs preparing music for concerts in November, and one of the choirs will feature this music by Gounod, the Mass dedicated to St Cecilia. In the other choir, it will include music by Benjamin Britten, the hymn to St Cecilia, a poem by W.H. Auden set to music by Benjamin Britten. And both these pieces of music do feature in the repertoire of good choirs around the world. Now let's pause the Gounod and let's hear just a little bit of Britten's hymn to St Cecilia. So during that interlude, I have been painting a membrane of flesh tones over the face and the hands, and I mixed pigments of golden ochre and a tiny bit of Ercolano red and about 3 grains of ultramarine blue, and that's been put in a number of coats over the top of the face and hands. I'm now adding some titanium white. I've started on the highlights. Well, while that's drying, I'll start putting in the shading for the hood, the veil. I've already painted the wimple, that sort of cap under the veil, and I have painted that in Venetian red. This outline is being done with burnt umber, dark and brown with a red tinge. A very handy pigment for making other pigments darker and for doing heavy outlines. Okay, so back to the face and a bit more titanium white mixed into the flesh tones. with a small 2 Kolinsky brush, just putting in some of the features of the face, and using burnt umber. By adding a little ultramarine blue to the burnt umber, we get a black, and that's very handy for doing eyebrows and the pupil in the eye. The whites of the eyes, obviously with white, titanium white, but mixed with raw umber green, so that it's not too white. But then on one side of each of the eyes, pure white, very tiny bit, and that brings it all to life. A bit more titanium white for the brightest highlights. Not pure white, just too ghastly. In the most obvious places, down the nose, across the top of the brow, top of the cheeks, chin, top of the mouth, and also around the neck and the earlobe. So the main features have been painted in with the burnt umber and a finer brush, the eyes, eyebrows, mouth, and particularly the iris of the eyes, and then the pupil done in black. And then we're sort of blushing her up a bit with very, very diluted Ercolano red line around the crease of the upper eyelid, down the side of the nose, at the lips of course, and some blush on the cheeks. This is very diluted, a lot of plain water with the mix. As with the application of any makeup in real life, this particular part of the painting, adding blush, adding makeup, can make a big difference next part of the painting, that is putting in the St Cecilia's veil. I didn't film, but you can see most of what I did there. What I'm doing now is the halo, and I'm preparing for gilding. The gilding method that I am using is called Kollner Instakoll. It's a German system. It's not very old, and it as closely as all get out gives a result that pretty closely resembles water gilding. That is gold which is very shiny. What I'm doing now is applying the base. The base is a very high quality acrylic, and it seals the area which has been sanded and then made very, very smooth, shiny smooth, finally with a steel wool of a very fine grade used by French polishers. Any blemish in the surface will show up in the gold. I've mixed this Kollner base with about 2 parts of clean water, and then I'm kind of putting it on. You can put it on thin, quite dry, but in this instance I'm pooling it on, really making it sit up with a meniscus. And there are 2 coats, at least 2 coats, and it's being put on dead flat because it is so it would just flow all over the place. You just can't put it on easily, so it has to be dead flat. So it's dry now, and I'm doing some more work on the veil. The veil I have painted with an undercoat of unbleached titanium, and then doing highlights in pure titanium white. I realized that the unbleached titanium and the titanium white the tonal values were not great enough. There wasn't enough variation, and I put in some of the stronger lines using adding raw sienna to the unbleached titanium mix, but then I've also darkened the whole of the area with a little bit of the raw sienna mixed with the unbleached titanium, and it gives a much better variation in the tonal qualities. Using burnt umber here to put in the main markings and shadings of the garments. And also opportunity to define the hands a bit more strongly. Don't like putting direct lines around things like hands, but it is a shadowing effect. Now, for the undergarment, I'm painting this with a ultramarine blue, which is a very blingy colour. It's very bright, beautiful, but it's too bright for this. So I add burnt umber, and it makes a really nice blue, softer. And it's the same mix that I'm now putting as background. Those who've watched other videos that I've done of painting icons will be used to me putting in the background very late in the process. But also those who are used to these videos will also not be used to be gilding, putting on gold. Before I put the gold on, I want to have the background in place. Basically two schools of thought when it comes to gilding. One is put the gold on first, and the other is put the gold on later. If it goes on later, it does need to be a very dry paint underneath, or the gold just sticks to the slightly damp paint. Because I'm right-handed, cutting in on some of these edges, I really need to turn my image upside down so that I can cut in more accurately. Using a number 6 sized brush, Kolinsky brush. Ultramarine blue and burnt umber and titanium white. So several coats later, and it's looking quite respectable. I'm adding more titanium white to the blue mixture for the highlights. A bit more white to make bright highlights, but covering less of the area. Caput mortuum is the colour for the outer garment. It's a reddy purple. It's very strong. Quite opaque. Blocking this in with a number 6 Kolinsky brush. And again, this will also be highlighted with the addition of titanium white. Just getting this colour around the fingertips. Little white patch appearing there, called making a hole. It's when you think you're putting on more paint, but in fact you're taking it off, and it's happening. It goes through to the gesso underneath. It's putting in a glaze here, just evening out the tones a bit. There was too much variation, and it helps bind it all together. A few darker folds going back in. Now this is straight ultramarine blue, much brighter and darker. Most closely resembles lapis lazuli, but much, much cheaper. Now I've added some titanium white to the caput mortuum for the highlights. St Cecilia is probably best known as the patroness of musicians. It's written that as the musicians played at her wedding, she sang in her heart to the Lord. And her feast day is celebrated in the Roman Catholic Church and in the Eastern Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, and in the Anglican Communion. It's celebrated on the 22nd of November. She died on the 22nd of November in 230 in the Common Era. She was born in the Common Era 200 in Rome. Many of the stories about her are fictional, but she did exist, and she was a martyr. She is said to have been beheaded with a sword. An early church, St Cecilia, was founded in the 3rd century by Pope Urban I in the Trastevere section of Rome, reputedly on the site of the house in which she lived. And a number of musical compositions are dedicated to her, including a Mass by Gounod and the hymn to St Cecilia by Benjamin Britten. And her feast day has become the occasion for concerts and musical festivals. Now I've been putting off painting the organ. It's lots of straight lines, and strangely curved lines are much easier than straight lines. The thing about straight lines is that, well, they have to be straight. I'm using a flat brush. It's a fairly narrow flat brush, but for putting in the pipes it works quite well. I want to do the notes, the ivories, quite differently from the way Joseph Brown painted them in the model that I'm using. You can see there on the left, actually they have a kind of reverse perspective, which is quite common in Orthodox iconography. However, I want to depict my ivories, my notes, direct on, not looking down on them. So it'll look a bit different. Now I'm putting in a white circle around the halo and a red just on the outside of the white, and it went in first go. Phew. Now the inscription. And what I've set out to do here is to set the inscription in two square shapes on either side of the halo, and each of these square shapes is 30 mil by 30 mil. So Saint in that box and Cecilia in the other. And the battery ran out of the camera, so we didn't see it finished. Now, a scary bit. This is 23 karat gold, and it is attached to this transfer paper. It's called medium press, and I was cutting this into strips before placing it onto the base, which I put on at least a couple of hours ago, and down it goes. Before I press that on, you didn't see me do it, you'll see it in a moment, but I breathe on the surface and then press on the transfer paper to make it adhere to the base, and voila, there it is. The Kolner Instacol method does have what's called an activator, but I don't use the activator. It's much quicker, easier to just breathe on the surface, and it's all it needs. Down it goes. You can go back and patch up bits. The base has yellow ochre mixed in with it, and as a result of that, any patches that don't quite take to, it looks much better having that gold color, that yellow color underneath rather than white. Some of my friends use a clear base, but do an underpainting of red. That's quite common in water gilding and in oil gilding, to have a red colour underneath. It enriches the colour of the gold somewhat, and it just brushes away. A few repairs. see the shine, but it's not the final shine. Here comes the final shine. The clean cotton pad will sweep right around and cleans off. That's sort of in place of burnishing. You just finish that off. Since putting on the gold, a few other things have happened to St Cecilia. The outer frame, I added a bit more white to the blue paint to make that lighter, and also between the dark and the light there's that border of unbleached titanium, that sort of pale yellow, and it just frames it a little bit better. It's been a joy to paint St Cecilia. It's been many years since I have put gold on an icon, and I quite enjoyed doing that again. All in all, it's been a good journey, and thank you for coming along with me on that journey as I've painted St Cecilia of Rome.